A very good afternoon and thank you for joining us on Beetv Global News at 12. I am Ruth Ogbodu and now the news in detail. In November, a passenger train carrying nearly 500 people was forced to make an emergency stop in eastern Poland after a damaged overhead power line collapsed onto the train, smashing several windows and damaging the track ahead. Around the same period, explosive detonated beneath a passing freight train elsewhere on the same railway line. The reports.
No fatalities or injuries were recorded in either incident, and the physical damage was limited. However, Polish authorities described the event as acts of sabotage and attributed responsibility to Russia's intelligence services. In response, Poland moved swiftly to strengthen security nationwide. The government deployed 10,000 troops to guard critical infrastructure, including railway, energy facilities, and other strategic installations, citing growing concerns over foreign-backed destabilization efforts. The incidents in Poland formed part of a wider pattern documented by the Associated Press. According to an AP database, at least 145 cases of sabotage, arsons, cyber disruption, and other hostile acts have been recorded across Europe since Russia launched its full-scale invasion of Ukraine in 2022. Western officials believe the campaign is being orchestrated by Moscow as part of a broader effort to intimidate European governments, undermine public confidence, and disrupt support for Ukraine. The database includes incidents targeting transportation network, military-linked facilities, energy infrastructure, and government institutions in multiple European countries. While many of the attacks caused limited damage and avoided mass casualties, officials warned that they demonstrated a sustained and coordinated effort to test Europe's defenses and exploit vulnerabilities. Russia has repeatedly denied involvement in sabotage operations on European soil. However, Western intelligence agencies argue that the pattern, timing, and methods used in incident points to Russian intelligence services or proxy actors acting on their behalf. Security analysts say the event highlights a shift towards hybrid warfare, where conventional military action is combined with covert operations designed to destabilize adversaries without triggering direct armed conflicts. As investigations continue, European governments are increasing surveillance, strengthening infrastructure protection, and expanding counter-intelligence efforts amid warning that further acts of disruption remain likely. Evelyn is reporting for Beetv News.
British consumer price inflation fell more sharply than expected in November, easing to 3.2% from 3.6% in October, according to official figures released on Wednesday, a day before the Bank of England is widely expected to announce an interest rate cut. The reports.
The slowdown in inflation marks the lowest reading in several months and reinforces signs that price pressures in the UK economy are continuing to cool after a prolonged period of elevated inflation driven by higher energy, food, and housing costs. Data showed that the decline was supported by slower increases in food prices, easing energy costs, and a moderation in goods inflation as supply chain pressures continued to ease. Service inflation, which has been closely watched by policymakers as an indicator of domestic price pressures, also showed signs of gradual softening, though it remained elevated compared with pre-pandemic levels. The November figure came in below market expectation, surprising economists who had forecast a more modest decline. Core inflation, which strips out volatile items such as energy, food, alcohol, and tobacco, also edged lower, suggesting that underlying price pressures may be weakening more broadly across the economy. The latest inflation reading arrives at the critical moment for the Bank of England, which has kept interest rates at restrictive levels in an effort to rein in inflation. that peaked at multi-decade high in recent years. With inflation now moving closer to the central bank's 2% target, financial market increasingly expects policymakers to begin easing monetary policy to support economic growth. The UK economy has shown signs of strains in recent months, with weak growth, subdued consumer spending, and ongoing pressure on household finances. A sustained decline in inflation could provide the Bank of England with greater confidence that price stability is being restored, potentially opening the door to lower borrowing costs. However, policymakers are expected to remain cautious, balancing the risks of cutting rates too early against concerns that persistent services inflation and wage growth could reignite price pressures. The Bank of England rate's decision is due on Thursday, with investors and businesses closely watching for signals on the pace and timing of any future cuts as inflation continues its downward trajectory. Evelyn Isibla reporting for Beetv News.
Warner Bros. Discovery's board of directors is moving to formally oppose Paramount Skydance hostile takeover offer value at about $108.4 billion, signaling strong preference for its existing strategic deal with Netflix, according to multiple reports familiar with the matter. The board has concluded that Paramount's proposal, despite its higher headline valuation, carries greater financial, regulatory, and execution risk and does not serve shareholders as well as the Netflix-backed transaction, the reports.
Sources indicate the board believes the Paramount offer fails to meet the threshold of a superior proposal, a key legal standard under Warner Bros. Discovery's current agreement with Netflix. As a result, directors are expected to recommend that shareholders reject the Paramount bid and support the Netflix deal instead. Paramount's proposal, led by the Ellison family and backed by Skydance, is structured as an all-cash tender offer that would acquire all outstanding shares of Warner Bros. Discovery at a significant premium. However, the WBD board has raised concerns about the certainty of financing, noting that parts of the bid rely on complex funding arrangements and lack the same level of binding commitments present in the Netflix agreement. In contrast, the Netflix transaction, valued at roughly $82 to $83 billion, is viewed internally as more predictable and strategically aligned. The deal provides Netflix with access to Warner Bros. Discovery's crown jewel assets, including HBO, Warner Bros. Studios, DC Entertainment, and globally valuable franchises such as Harry Potter and Game of Thrones. Board members reportedly see Netflix's global scale, balance sheet strength, and streaming-first focus as better positioned to maximize the long-term value of these properties. Industry analysts say control of these franchises has become central to the intensifying streaming wars, with Netflix eager to lock in premium intellectual property that can drive subscriber growth and retention worldwide. Paramount's bid, while aggressive, is seen as more financially stretched, given its existing debt load and ongoing restructuring efforts. The board stance underscores a broader calculation, deal certainty over price, while Paramount's offer is larger on paper. Warner Bros. Discovery directors appear convinced that the Netflix deal offers greater closing certainty, fewer regulatory obstacles, and clearer strategic upside for shareholders and the company's creative assets. If the board proceeds as expected, shareholders will soon be formally advised to reject Paramount's tender offer. Paramount may still attempt to appeal directly to investors or revise its bid, but analysts say any improved offer would need to address financing clarity and risk concerns to gain traction. For now, Warner Bros. Discovery position signals that the battle for some of the world's most valuable entertainment franchise is tilting decisively in Netflix's favor, potentially reshaping the future of global streaming and media consolidation. Temitope Oluwafemi reporting for Beetv.
President Donald Trump announced Wednesday evening that the U.S. government will send a $1,776 bonus check to the members of the U.S. military ahead of Christmas, framing the one-time payment as a warrior dividend and trying it to revenue from tariffs imposed by its administration. Speaking from the White House diplomatic reception room in a prime-time address intended to shore up public confidence in the economy, Trump said the payments were already being processed and will go out before the holidays. He said the amount, $1,776, was chosen in honor of the year the United States was founded. Trump argued that tariff revenues had exceeded expectations and would cover the cost of the initiative. We made a lot more money than anybody thought because of tariffs, he said, adding that nobody deserved it more than our military. The president's remarks were part of a broader effort to defend his record on the economy amid public concern over prices and living costs, and to counter criticism from Democratic opponents. In the speech, he repeatedly blamed Democrats for economic challenges, while asserting that key indicators such as inflation and consumer prices were moving in positive directions under his leadership. About 1.45 million service members are expected to receive the bonus, which would total roughly $2.6 billion in government spending. Trump suggested the funds came from his tariff program, though it remains unclear how the payments will be funded or whether they require congressional approval under the federal budget law. The address came as Trump's approval ratings on economic issues have dipped, and as his administration faces the challenge of convincing the public that the U.S. economy is on solid footing ahead of the upcoming 2026 midterm elections. Russian President Vladimir Putin on Wednesday warned that Moscow would seek to expand its territorial gains in Ukraine if peace negotiations fail, saying Russia is prepared to continue its campaign through military means if its demands are rejected by Kyiv and its Western allies. The report.
Putin made the remarks while addressing senior officials and staff of Russia's defense ministry, where he reviewed the progress of the war and outlined the Kremlin position on possible negotiations. He said Russia has not abandoned the idea of peace talks, but insisted that any settlement must meet Moscow's condition, which he described as essential to Russia's security and strategic interests. According to Putin, if Ukraine and its allies continue to refuse this demand, Russia will have no choice but to pursue its objectives on the battlefield. He warned that such a scenario would likely result in further Russian advances and an expansion of the areas under Moscow's control. The future course of events depends on whether our proposals are taken seriously, Putin said, adding that Russia is capable of continuing military operations for as long as necessary. He stressed that the Russian armed forces remain fully prepared and resources to carry out the campaign. Putin accused Western countries of prolonging the conflicts by supplying Ukraine with weapons, intelligence and financial assistance. He claimed that this support has encouraged Kyiv to reject negotiations, thereby increasing the risk of escalation and further destruction. The Russian leader also defended the military campaign, saying it was launched to protect Russia's national interests and to counter what he described as security threats along Russia's borders. He maintained that Moscow's goals have not changed and will be achieved either through diplomacy or force. The warning comes amid continued heavy fighting across several regions of Ukraine, with both Russian and Ukrainian forces reporting ongoing clashes. While Russia claims it has consolidated control over some areas, Ukraine insists it will continue to resist and reclaim occupied territory. Western governments have repeatedly stated that any peace talk must be based on respect for Ukraine's sovereignty and territorial integrity. Ukrainian officials have also said they will not accept conditions that involve ceding territory or limiting the country's right to choose its own security arrangements. Putin's statement underscores the fragile prospects for diplomacy and highlights the risk of a prolonged conflict as both sides remain entrenched in their positions with no immediate breakthrough in sight. Evelyn Isabel reporting for Beetv News.
The solemn event took place at Dover Air Force Base in Delaware where the flag-draped transfer cases of the victims were carried from a U.S. military aircraft and placed onto waiting vehicles in a deeply moving ritual known as a dignified transfer. The ritual is a long-standing military tradition intended to honor those who have died while serving their country overseas. Before the transfer began, Trump met privately with the families of the fallen. He was joined on the tarmac by Defense Secretary Pete Hegseth, leaders from Iowa, including Governor Kim Reynolds, members of Congress, and high-ranking military officials. The two Iowa National Guard members killed in the attack on Saturday in the Syrian desert were identified as Sergeant Edgar Bryan Torres Tova, 25, of Des Moines, and Sergeant William Nathaniel Howard, 29, of Marshalltown. Both were assigned to the 1st Squadron, 113th Cavalry Regiment, part of the Iowa National Guard. They have been widely honored by fellow service members and state leaders as courageous patriots. Also killed was Ayad Mansour Sakat, a U.S. civilian interpreter from Macomb, Michigan, who had been working alongside American forces in Syria. His role reflected the broader partnership between U.S. troops and local support personnel during operations in the region. Officials say 3 other Iowa National Guard members were wounded in the same attack. Their identities have not been released and they are receiving medical care. The attack occurred amid ongoing U.S. military operations in eastern Syria aimed at countering remnants of the Islamic State group and supporting regional stability as part of a broader coalition effort. U.S. Central Command and other officials are investigating the circumstances of the ambush, which involved hostile gunfire directed at a U.S. and partner force convoy. President Trump has pledged to hold responsible groups to account and vowed retaliation against those who carried out the attack. The incident underscores the continued risk facing American service members and civilian partners in conflict zones, even as strategic priorities in the Middle East evolve. At Dover, the atmosphere was quiet and reverent as military carry teams paused only to adjust the flag, cover transfer cases, and salute the fallen. By protocol, civility and solemnity guide the event. No speeches are made on the tarmac, and 10 dignitaries, including the president, observe in respectful silence. Trump has described witnessing these transfers as among the most difficult duties of the presidency, a sentiment echoed by several who attended the ceremony. After the ritual is concluded, the remains will be transported for burial preparations and final funeral services with full military honors. Temitope Oluwafemi reporting for BTV News.
Police in northeastern Spain carried out a court-ordered eviction on Wednesday to remove around 400 mostly undocumented migrants from an abandoned school building they had been occupying in Badalona near Barcelona. The report.
Officials said that most occupants left voluntarily before dawn, anticipating the eviction in the middle of winter as officers from Cataluna's regional office in riot gear entered the site early under the judicial order. The squad has been used as a makeshift shelter since 2023, primarily by migrants from Senegal and Gambia who had moved into the long-abandoned school due to a lack of affordable housing. Although the eviction was completed without major violence, there were tense moments as some residents walked past armored officers while leaving with their belongings. Authorities reported that 18 people were detained on suspicion of residing in Spain without proper authorization during the operation. City officials maintained they acted on public safety ground after the court ruled the building unsafe, and the mayor of Badalona, Xavier Garcia, publicly announced the eviction, reiterating his top stance on irregular settlements. Under the judicial ruling, the town hall must provide access to social services for those displaced but is not required to guarantee housing for all. Local advocates expressed concern that many evicted people may end up without shelter in cold weather, warning that eviction without alternative could worsen the plight of vulnerable migrants. Some temporary accommodation assistance has been offered, with a small number receiving shelter through municipal and regional services, but advocates say these resources fall far short of the need. The eviction highlights broader tension in Spain over migration, housing shortages, and political division between local conservative and the national government on how to balance enforcement with humanitarian concern. Evelyn Isabel reporting for BTV News.
Going on a short break, do stay with us.
Hip hooray! The message is in the woman of today. We're rolling our drums to celebrate a proud daughter of the mighty Afema land, a woman of purpose, a woman of valor, a woman of excellence with an unshakable faith, Umaru Patrick Dora Odufa, the CEO and founder of Dora's Touch Aesthetics Clinic and Spa, a top-tier medical aesthetics brand renowned for professionalism, innovation, and genuine care. Trained in the United Kingdom and certified at a master's level in aesthetics medicine by the Northern American Board of Aesthetics Medicine. She is dedicated to transforming lives, restoring confidence, and empowering people through beauty and wellness. Dora is a multi-business entrepreneur, visionary leader, and philanthropist. In 2023, she founded the Patrick Dora Help for the Helpless Foundation, an NGO focused on supporting vulnerable people, empowering women, uplifting families, and restoring hope across community. She's also actively involved in politics, driven by a strong commitment to service, leadership, development, and meaningful transformation. Her political journey is rooted in passion, integrity, and the desire to create opportunities and positive change for her people. A deeply spiritual woman, Dora is guided by her unwavering faith in God, her strong values, and her commitment to integrity. She is a woman who never compromises her values, a disciplined go-getter, and a symbol of resilience, grace, and purpose. Her life continues to speak loudly, a testimony of hard work, divine favor, and a destiny anchored in impact. Today, we raise our glasses to toast for a woman of inestimable value on the occasion of her birthday. Hip, 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 hooray! The message is endorsed by Idahosa Michael.
Welcome back, and now to the business news. Nigeria textiles import climbed to 814.27 billion in the first 9 months of 2025, highlighting a growing dependence on foreign fabrics despite repeated assurances by the federal government that the sector is being revived. The report.
Trade data showed imports of 228.83 billion naira in the first quarter, 337.12 billion naira in the second, and 248.32 billion naira in the third, marking a 47.43% increase from the 552.31 billion recorded in the same period of 2024. Industry stakeholders said the surge in imports reflects the continued decline of local textile production, driven by policy inconsistencies, weak execution of intervention programs, and widespread corruption. They argue that access to affordable financing remains limited, promised reforms have stalled, and structural challenges such as poor cotton farming, insecurity, and limited local polyester capacity persist. The Nigerian Textile Manufacturers Association noted that government measures to revive the industry have largely remained rhetorical. It said a 10% levy introduced after the lifting of the textile import ban was meant to be reinvested in the sector, but the funds have not been effectively channeled towards improving competitiveness or reducing import dependency. Debt servicing and personnel costs exceeded the federal government's total revenue in the first 7 months of 2025, as earnings fell sharply below projections and capital spending suffered cuts. Data from the 2026 to 2028 medium-term expenditure framework showed that the government earned 13.67 trillion naira between January and July, far below slightly exceeded expectations, offering limited relief to the strained fiscal position. The federal government's Lagos-Calabar Coastal Highway project has begun attracting strong interest from international investors, with 4 companies indicating willingness to refund the full cost of Section 1 in exchange for operating and tolling the road. The Minister of Works said the project was designed as an investment-led initiative rather than a traditional public work program. According to the ministry, the government is directly funding about 30% of the highway's cost, while the remaining 70% is expected to come from international financiers. Officials described the project as having a high return on investment and positioned it as part of a broader strategy to attract external funding into the economy. The coastal highway is being promoted as a strategic economic corridor intended to link and unlock multiple infrastructure projects nationwide. The minister also dismissed concerns raised over the project's procurement process, maintaining that due procedures were followed and that the road represents a long-term investment rather than a standalone construction effort. Temitope Oluwafemi reporting for BTV News.
And now to entertainment news. Comedian Diwan has responded after fashion entrepreneur Vicky James measured him during a recent cooking podcast. a comment many viewers interpreted as subtle shade. The remark ignited online conversations, with social media users debating whether the reference was dismissive of the comedian, and also will Smith visit Antarctica with Hertz's Rubik star in 7-continent adventure. The report.
Reacting to the attention, Dion disclosed that he and Vicky James had a brief relationship shortly after his return from Big Brother Naija in 2018. He said there was no bad blood between them, explaining that the relationship ended due to personality differences rather than conflict. Dion described Vicky James as a good person, but said he struggled with what he perceived as controlling tendencies during their time together. He stressed that he has moved on and only addressed the issue because his name was mentioned publicly, sparking mixed reactions online over whether he was right to speak out. Singer Davido caused excitement during a Twitch live stream when he urged platform CEO Dan Clancy to raise content creator Kataife's potential deal to $1 million. The moment occurred during a live session hosted by Kataife, who had invited Davido to join him. Davido spent time interacting with fans and those present before making the bold request, confidently stating that his voice carried influence. His comment immediately drew loud reactions from Kataife, who appeared shocked and overwhelmed by the gesture. The moment quickly went viral, with fans praising Davido for supporting emerging creators. Kataife expressed gratitude for the support, adding humorously that he was glad he had not already accepted any deal. Hollywood actor Will Smith traveled to Antarctica with former Wales rugby star turned adventurer Richard Parks as part of a documentary series that follows his journey across all 7 continents. Parks served as Smith's guide during the expedition, describing the experience as special and deeply inspiring. The series, titled Pole to Pole, took 5 years to complete and is set to premiere on January 14 on National Geographic in the UK and Disney. Each episode features Smith being guided by experts, scientists, and explorers as he explores different parts of the world. Park said Antarctica isolation had a profound effect on Smith, stripping life down to its essentials. While his main responsibility was ensuring Smith's safety, this included correcting risky behavior during the trip, moments which he said reflected the intense but rewarding nature of the experience captured in the show. And that's it on the entertainment news. Evelyn is reporting for Beetv News.
And that'll be all on our 12 p.m. Global News. Thank you for joining, and stay tuned for our 3 p.m. news updates. Do have a lovely afternoon. Thank you.